drop me a message. This is me a couple of years ago on one of the main antennas of funkfeuer Vienna, which is a free wireless network. And during this talk, I will try to explain you how I got up there and the actual reason I'm here today in Bratislava, and I'm good and excited about being at Progress Bar. So as you might have known because of the conversation of the previous talk, my background is not purely technical. I'm actually an MD by training, so a medical doctor, and I did a lot of work in biology and at least for the last 3 years I worked in biology. So I usually don't do this stuff. But since I got a computer when I was a kid, I was really fascinated by this digital world that opened in these devices, and I pretty soon started to program my computer and to play around with it. And when Windows 95 came along, which I got in '97, I was so frustrated because it hit everything for me and I couldn't do anything anymore. And about a year later I discovered GNU Linux and I installed it, and it was a revelation because suddenly everything was there for me to understand and to play with. And I just loved it, and ever since then I love open systems. And this love for open systems and working with computers led me to meet some people very early on in around 2000 or so, who then founded the Viennese chapter of the Chaos Computer Club. For those who don't know the Chaos Computer Club, I think everyone knows the Chaos Computer Club. So we founded the Viennese chapter of the Chaos Computer Club, and when Wi-Fi came around and got popular by that time, we spent a lot of afternoons doing this. We went word riding because it was fun and there were free networks open, and we could go out and you could sit outside the headquarters of a major Austrian newspaper and print on their printers and stuff like this. If you want to do anything and you want to be anonymous, you just go and grab the next access point and do your stuff there. But with time this got boring, and because we are hackers and not actually into breaking into things but creating new things, I teamed up with a couple of friends, and we had this idea of creating this anonymous access point somewhere central in the city, where people just could go if they have the need to surf the net or do anything on the internet without being known. And we wanted to create a thing, and we paired up with a group of people called Quintessence, which is basically the Austrian Digital Civil Liberties Defense Squad. So they deal with all the political parts. And after about, so we plugged together our own access point and wrote our own firmware based on Linux, and with a small gateway interface and all this. And after a few months, we launched this access point called QSpot right here at the very central at the Museumsquartier in Vienna. So for those who have been to Vienna, this is actually a place where a lot of people hang out during the summer in this central yard here. And so suddenly one summer we announced, hey, why don't you all bring your laptops and do your work here, because you can. And we won't charge you, we won't track you, we won't know anything, and we won't store any logs. And this was nice, and a lot of people came and actually sat there with laptops. This was at a time where going to a cafe and having wireless LAN there wasn't usual or wasn't common. So this was where
Which year was this?
This is in Vienna.
Which year?
Which year? It was we launched in 2003, I think. Mm-hmm. At least the Quintessence homepage says 2003. My date, I don't remember the exact year, but I think that's plausible. And it got us a lot of media attention, and what it also got us, at least me and the friends who worked on implementing the software, was attention by a person who was responsible for a then very desolate, formerly provider-run wireless network called funkfeuer. And he approached us and he said, hey, we have this network infrastructure and basically it's decaying and no one is taking care of. Would you like to take care of it? And we sat together and discussed and we knew what to do. Now Vienna's, to that point, didn't have any community wireless LAN network. And this was exactly the thing we wanted to do. And so we started out. And just to illustrate how desolate the network is, the network actually consisted of about 7 nodes. And all these nodes had public IP addresses. We had a good uplink to the Vienna Internet Exchange, sponsored by a major provider in Austria at that time. So this was good to have. However, the network was statically routed. And the hardware was somehow haphazardly attached, and it was a lot of maintenance. If you look at here, this suitcase thing actually contains a whole PC computer. And the antenna is somewhere up here. It's a really sad weathered Yagi pointing somewhere. And if you look at the pole, it's a rusty pole, and the thing looks like it's duct taped on there. So it was horrible infrastructure, and it was so high maintenance that we instantly decided we don't want to do it this way. We don't want to have a high maintenance network where one person crawls around on the roofs of Vienna the whole week just to keep 7 nodes up and running. We want to have more nodes, and we want to have it easier. So we looked around what to do, and we pretty immediately decided we want to go and do some dynamic routing. And at that time, mesh routing was really popular, and a really popular academic subject. So for those who don't know what mesh routing is, it's actually that one node here passes on the internet traffic to all the other nodes that are. And this is done by dynamic routing, so this one can actually move over here and still have connection to the network, and all the nodes can find it if they need to. And it was great because there were a lot of protocols, but the problem, I don't know who ever worked with academic implementations of software. The problems were, most of the protocols were nice, but the implementation was somehow fiddly. So it worked with one Linux kernel version that you had to heavily patch in order to get this thing run at all. And so we played around a lot there, and finally discovered what is the master thesis of a guy in Sweden, I think, Andreas Tönnesson. He had this implementation of a protocol called OLSR, so Open Link State Routing, and it was the only one that was not requiring any patching to the kernel. So it could also run on other operating systems, like on Windows or BSD-based operating systems, such as Mac OS X. And it was also actually one of the few really working really well. So we pretty soon decided to go for it and use OLSR, and we still do. And then 3 really lucky things happened to us. And they happened almost immediately at the same time. And I think if these 3 things hadn't happened, we couldn't have made what we did. So the first was that a well-known German hacker called Harald Welte, who I'm sure a lot of people have heard, discovered he was responsible for the net filter code in Linux kernels, so in kernel versions 2.4 and 2.6. And he discovered that some of his code actually is in binary-only firmware in some router devices. And this really pissed him off, because he released his code as GPL to the world, and the companies just didn't care about it. So he started to prosecute them by law. And he started to have these lawsuits in Germany against these big network companies for them to release at least link to the source code and at least admit they were using some Linux-based system. And this really scared the shit of some of the producers. Not exactly Cisco here, but actually the company that was before and Cisco bought them, Linksys, and they had this nice cheap wireless LAN routers. They were really cheap. I think they were, when we started, around 70 euros a piece. Now they're probably around 50. And they had, because to save costs and everything, had implemented the Linux firmware on them. And pretty soon after Harald started his ruckus, they actually released a software development kit for your firmware, and they allowed everyone to create custom firmware and upload it. So we suddenly had cheap hardware available that could run our routing daemon and that could work as sort of the workhorse of the network. And the other nice thing is on the back, you don't see it here, they have really good connectors for antennas. So this is cheap hardware and it works well and you can connect it to any antenna. The second thing that happened was a cultural thing. At that time, as you heard in the introduction, there's a lot of these networks, and they all happened to boom at that time. So there was a huge international movement, like the really similar to the hackerspace movement that started somewhere in 2007, was at that time with free community networks. So we had free community networks somewhere in Jerusalem. We have them in the Czech Republic. We have them in Slovakia. We have them in Germany. I don't know how many people know funkfeuer in Germany. All over the world, these networks were booming, and they were all fighting with the same problems and all trying to do it a similar way. And actually, a lot of them started using similar technology as we did. So we sort of surfed this wave of excitement that was going through this community internationally. And also, we started to grow. So more people started to pour in, and we met once a week in a room that's about 2/3 of the size as this room, to do some work. And every week, new people would come and would be there and ask how to be part of the network. And some actually joined later on, most of them didn't. And we got nice media coverage, and even more people poured in. So sometimes it was really crowded in there, so you couldn't do any work because there were so many new people asking all these questions. But this was really exciting. So this was like we were really surfing this wave of excitement. This as motivation for us. And the third thing that happened is one thing you might already have heard, is that the city of Vienna made this really stupid decision politically, but really good for us, to outsource funding for network art and network culture, as they called it, to the community. So suddenly there were about 100,000 euros a year to be distributed among different projects, and somehow the community decided to do it in a democratic fashion. Basically what this ends up is whoever has a large user base gets the cash. We had a large user base. And because we decided in the beginning that we didn't want anyone who works on the project to earn money from it, we had a lot of money there to improve the network. And this, together with cheap hardware, together with nice internet uplink, fast internet uplink, public IP addresses, a lot of nice people around us, the media basically loving us, created a huge booming movement. And as you know, if you do such a thing, not everything is easy. So about a year, or about 2 years after we started the project and we really got going, the internet provider that was supporting us so well in letting us use their space and giving us IP addresses and giving us free uplink was bought by another internet provider. So this really sucked and put the whole project into danger. So there were two things we did to secure: first, the IP address space we had; second, the physical space we had. The IP address space was easy. We just registered with RIPE, got an AS, and asked for provider-independent IP space. This is expensive, but as you know, the city of Vienna had this nice decision, and we had money to afford it. and we still are in NAS and have provided independent IP space. The second thing we did was we went around to providers and asked, hey, who does want to support us in giving us a cheap internet uplink? And we actually have a co-hosting location to sponsor or to finance the uplink. So we have this server housing thing where my computer is standing, if it ever reacts again, and a lot of other people's computers are standing, and you pay a lower rate than you pay at the usual hosting providers, and you basically buy the bandwidth for the free network.
Do you still have this call?
Yes, we still have this. And so basically, IP space was secured. For the physical space, we were really scared about this because having these weekly meetings was a sort of social backbone to the network. And so when we heard about this, one thing I did was I wrote an email to everyone I knew who was interested in having a space somewhere. So this involved people from the Chaos Computer Club in Vienna. This involved people from a place called Inoce. They actually do this amazing autonomous sailboats. This involved Paul Böhm with his, or better known as Enki, with his Kubernetes circle. And they all met one Tuesday there and looked at the space, and we started to discuss that this space is going to be empty, and we really wanted to keep it because we need it as a part of our operational basis. But the people said, this is a good idea, but the space is too small. So a couple of people got together and started to meet regularly as well and do a lot of work. And about half a year later, the Meta Lab opened a few blocks away as a result of some providers being bought. And we actually started out with the same folding chairs as these here. So the sky is open. So right now, funkfeuer was actually able to keep the space for another 4 years due to the slow mills of bureaucracy in these giant corporations. And when the first provider that bought the provider that was supporting us was realizing there's this space and there's actually people there and using the space, it got bought by another provider. So it took them another time to realize there's this space, so we basically kept the space for about 4 years. After the initial provider was bought. So where does it put us now? Growing constantly and at sometimes faster and right now a little bit slower put us where we have 214 active nodes over the whole city of Vienna, some parts of Lower Austria, and actually the furthest away from Vienna and the closest here is in Hainburg, which is about 20 kilometers over the border. So we have this large network with a lot of nodes and a lot of interconnectedness. I don't know how to display all the links here, but if you display all the links, it's really confusing because it's just a huge spider web.
What are the colors in the and
there are different colors for the type of node. For example, the blue ones are ones that are actually connected with our main one through another internet connection. I don't know what the green ones are actually. I think it's the ones that are actually active right now with this view. And these ones are the active one. There's also a view where you can see all the ones people want to build, but they are not there yet or will never be. We're actually pretty happy about this.
and so are these all public hotspots? Or
these are not public hotspots. These are people participating in the network. A few of them
so
actually run
an
hotspot.
internet provider for these people.
Exactly, yes. But it's an internet provider where each of these people operates a piece of the network.
Yeah.
And let me see what's my next slide. Yeah, these are the basic principles the network has. So it's free and everybody's allowed to participate. we have the legal status of a club, but there is no membership fee or whatever, because we fear it might keep people from participating, and we can fund ourselves otherwise. There's this very essential piece, or very essential document that was created by a group of people. I actually don't know who they are. When all these movements or all these networks boomed, it's the Pico-peering agreement. And it basically says, hey, I'm here, give me free transit, I will give you free transit, and I won't do anything to your data as long as you don't do anything to your data. And it's an experimental network, or we see it as an experimental network, and there's still experiments running. Actually, a couple of things happened along the way. And one of them is that Andreas Tønnesen, who wrote the OSR daemon, actually graduated from university and started to work at this networking company. So he wasn't able to write any code anymore for OSR. And so a couple of people from Vienna actually took over, and OSR is now developed and tested on a real life network. And the basic motivation for most of the people is actually the network, and the value of this network, and the value of participating and paying I don't know how many €100 to put hardware on your roof and fighting with all the people who are living in your house to be able to put up an antenna. This value is so high that people are actually doing this.
So this value, what is this value? Is just not the value estimation you get, or is it money?
It's what it's worth to you personally. So to the people participating, having this network and having this idea of free infrastructure is worth, or free internet connection, and free as in here, is worth as much that they are willing to do this. And,
but so don't you think that if somebody just wants an internet connection, they can get it cheaper from you than from a commercial provider?
I actually doubt this, because there's two things that are not calculated into it. Setting this up requires some knowledge and requires you to work on it.
Yeah.
Because basically you are responsible, and if your internet drops out in the middle of the night and it's raining out there and it's a stormy night, you have to crawl onto the roof and fix your antenna or see what's up. And actually we did this, and it's not fun to crawl on dark, wet roofs if the storm is blowing, just because your mast has been securely tied with a fiber cable by the local fire department. But the point I wanted to go to is that a lot of value is actually in having free infrastructure, having infrastructure that is controlled by ourselves. And we actually were pretty happy about this until very recently. We were excitingly following all the events in Egypt, and then suddenly on January 27th, somewhere late at night, I got this tweet from Jacob Applebaum saying, hey, all my Egypt links are down. So what the fuck happened? And as you all know, someone pulled the plug, and the whole country was offline.
Vodafone pulled the plug. Let's say it out loud.
Vodafone pulled the plug.
Thank you, sir.
And boycott Vodafone, by the way. So Vodafone in Austria is Eins. I don't know what Vodafone in Slovakia is, or in Czech, but they are there. They actually provide this.
In Russia everywhere.
Huh?
In Hungary there is Vodafone actually. I would change my phone.
They actually have this nice, so if you're not sure which provider is connected to Vodafone in your country, they have this nice map on their homepage telling you which provider it is. So if you want to boycott Vodafone, check out the map. So this really kicked our butts, because this is the hour you need free infrastructure. And you can say, yeah, it's Egypt and it's a country far away and we don't know a lot of it. But actually, shit is happening in the European Union. So there's increasingly more and more political work done to censor the internet, to shut off your internet connection based on arbitrary rules, to keep connection data and to keep data where you were connected, at what time. And free infrastructure helps you in circumventing all these problems. So this brings me to the real reason I'm here. This is a European Union Parliament member.
No, she's a commissioner, sorry.
Oh, commissioner?
Yes.
And she's actually lobbying for DNS blocking certain websites with the pretext of child pornography, similar to what was done in Germany before and luckily failed. So now they're trying it on the level of the European Union, so it would not only affect Germany but everyone. They also tried to pass 3 strikes, I think, in the European Union. Do you know more about this?
Yes, no, they didn't.
No, they didn't pass it, but there's actually...
No, there are other ways around it because 3 strikes has failed in France, and now they are rephrasing it into other different contexts, like, for example, the UK has this voluntary cooperation, which is exactly the same, but with sidelining any kind of governmental interaction. It's the industry that's doing the same.
So actually, the point is that a lot of shit is happening there to actually make it harder for people to use their networks as networks should be used, which is both as consumers and producers, and to talk about things openly with each other. And so I have come to the conclusion some time ago that if in a pre-digital age, freedom of the press and freedom of speech was the important thing to have, in a digital age is actually the 4 free things. It's free software, free hardware, free content, and free infrastructure. And we have all these things. We have free software and free and open source software. We have open hardware projects booming everywhere. I think most of you know the MakerBot, which is an open hardware project. Some of you might know GNU Radio, which is a software-defined radio that's completely open source. We have free content, as for example defined by Creative Commons, and increasingly people are realizing that copyright is actually the nicest thing to do. So it gives you a lot more control over the things you create. It gives the control back to a creator and not to some value-creating agency. And we have free infrastructure in having free networks. The only problem we have in free infrastructure now is that they are very regional and at best national. And what we really need to prevent a situation where one country really shuts off or one country goes and really implement some sort of censorship is international peers. And I'm actually here today not to proudly present what we have done and to be a hero. I'm actually here oh, I have 10 minutes. I'm actually here to ask you kindly and humbly, please peer with us. We need international peers. So if anyone has rooftop access in Bratislava and has viewed over in direction of Hainburg, please talk to me after this talk. This is actually my final slide, and thank you for listening. Thank you for inviting me. Yes.
Just one comment. First, the blocking thing is Cecilia Malmström, and we had the vote on that last week, and we were quite successful in reaching some, I think there's only one provision in the end result that is dissatisfying, but I think it would have been impossible to remove that, so there's good news on that front, but they will not give up, so the fight is not won at all. This is one thing.
Just won the battle.
Yeah. The other thing is I'd like to reflect on this. I think this is really, really essential what you've been talking about. And as you might have realized, I'm quite active also in Brussels. And there's now the radio spectrum policy program going on this year, which means that after the digital switchover, we will have a digital dividend. That means the analog TV spectrum should be freed up, and it will be possibly, most of that will be sold to incumbents, to telecom companies and stuff like that. But we are fighting hard for getting this also in your hands, please. So my question is, what do you think is the future of that? Because the last time I read something about all these movements, it was showing decay and deterioration of these networks. It was not positive. So is there a future for that? What is needed for that? And in the radio spectrum policy program, how can we help you, and what do you need, and do you need this at all? Because I think this technology is essential for providing the last mile service for everyone. This is exactly that service that is being controlled by governments, by censorship, by blocking, by filtering, by censorship schemes and everything else. So if we can have a free infrastructure on the last mile, I think then a lot of our problems will go away.
First of all, thank you for being so grateful with me, graceful, for not knowing all the up-to-date political things. I haven't been to Europe. I just followed it for 2.5 years now, and I'm back, and I intend to follow all the political things more closely and better.
What do you need? What is the future?
I think you are right. There is some sort of decay in developing these networks. At least they don't grow as fast and don't cause as much stir as they used to do some years back. We also observed this in Vienna, where we had this phase of rapidly growing from about 20 nodes to 150 nodes, and now the growth has sort of slowed down. Simply, I think, because we have reached a saturation of people who are actually willing to climb on roofs during the night. And the other thing is, mobile internet is becoming increasingly popular by.
I'm sorry. I must insist on not calling that the internet.
No.
In this crowd.
Okay. So mobile
data access or
IP
something.
data access is becoming increasingly cheap and easy for the consumer to do with their cell phone providers. I think that's another part that's really blocking the progress. I don't know exactly where this slowdown comes from, but it would be good. It would be good to know and to boost these networks again, especially with the prospect of having quite a lot of liberties taken away from networks. As for the open spectrum, any kind of bandwidth you can get is good. And as far as I understand, the ones that are freed, they are better suitable for long-range communications than than our 2.5 or 5 gigahertz devices are. So we could really use them to bridge larger distances and really make an international connected free infrastructure.
I have good news, because the Hungarians just delayed their switchover until 2014, which is the latest date. So that means in the neighboring countries, you cannot also switch. So we have 2 more years for fighting for free spectrum for us.
But excuse me, how does it work actually? Because when you talk about free infrastructure, so is it kind of telecommunication, or it is through connecting wireless? How actually does it work actually?
It's mainly wireless links that are pulled out across the space.
But can you do that between countries?
Sure.
Because
why
if you have
not?
this
There is no mesh, no fine wired mesh between the countries anymore.
Like it can do it from here to Egypt? I mean because if
not from here to Egypt.
It's economically not feasible. Let's say that nothing is impossible.
But I mean,
it's not impossible,
wavelengths
but
actually, because there are wavelengths that you send them, emit them, and they have to receive it. But, I mean, small actually distances, so you can actually do that. But can you do it? What is the actual distance you can cover?
So our longest link right now is about 20 kilometers. And this is in a setting where not everything is up high on mountains and nothing in between. So this is actually in an urban setting where a house just happens to be standing on the hill and the other house is somewhere down to the nude. The distances, and this is all done within the legal range you're allowed to transmit and
but can you actually deal with the problem like Egypt with this, if you have this kind of free infrastructure?
there were actually similar things popping up as soon as the internet was shut down. So people were all over Egypt and the cities were opening their wireless networks and running DBS services. I haven't been there, so that's just hearsay. I think if a structure like this was in place that was internationally connected before, you could still have at least some sort of limited connection into a country that's completely shut off. And this is the important thing. We have to move on now, and I think this is something that can move on for infrastructure quite a bit. We start to collaborate much tighter internationally and actually start to peer internationally over our own infrastructure.
We have one question door.
Yeah.
Okay, so first, thank you for the presentation. I think that maybe if you talk about network, it could be more clear in the introduction, like what is the real value of it, because I think you kind of implied it. But basically, as far as I understand, you want to say that we don't want the governments and the corporations to run the internet infrastructure, but we want the people to run it, because we trust the people as a community, and we don't trust the government and the corporation, because we think that they mess with our data. And for example, in Egypt, because they control it, they could close it. But even if there are some evil people who want to close the internet, if the internet is in the hands of a lot of different people, then it doesn't matter if one or two people close their connections, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So for me, one reason I didn't go further into this is I grew up with having connectivity, at least in my adult life, in a way that's sort of omnipresent. It's this idea of we having data access like water in our house, and we want water to be controlled by communities and not privately. At least people in Bolivia are going and fighting on the streets for this kind of things. So we want to have the same thing. We want to have the same thing with data connections with network infrastructure, because it's so essential for at least for people like me and in my generation and even in generations coming. Having this digital communication with people all around the world is increasingly important, and we see this. It has some positive effects. It has some negative effects, like local communities decaying. But I think that's a basic thing. So for me, having this in the hands of people who really need it and cooperate it, it's a sort of presumption I don't think a lot about, simply because of my background somehow. But thank you for pointing this out.
And second, how do you? Okay, so you want international peers. This is what you said. So how do you want to do that? Like, let's say that we have, I don't know, 10 nodes community network in Budapest, which you don't have. Let's assume it. So you have a network in Vienna. How do you want to connect the two cities? Do you have some exact plans for this?
There are no exact plans because we haven't done it so far, and I think a lot of it requires to sit together with the people running the network and try to understand each other's topologies and how they are organized, and try to find the best solution.
For a while I had an idea to buy one of those ex-border houses on the border, which will have the advantage of having internet from two countries and having electricity from two countries, which doesn't really matter because both of them are e-owned. But that would be perfect for a server house from a redundancy point of view. Do you want to buy one?
Unfortunately, I don't have the money right now.
Maybe
I think that this is an interesting idea. And they are empty. We saw this now. We rode past them with our bikes today. So they're really sad, in a sad state. So maybe we can start an international hackerspace.
Okay.
Yes.
This last question.
What about traffic of your network? Does most of the traffic of your network end in exchange center, or Are there some communication just between the peers?
There is communication between the peers. I think the majority right now is really going out.
So if someone
Especially bandwidth
okay,
wise.
so if someone goes to the center, you are like send coordinator.
From the internet.
If this is yes, but we are fortunate to have to link directly to a switch port at the Vienna Internet Exchange, which is the main internet exchange in Austria. So unless this is really shut down, it's running. And this is exactly the reason we need international peers. Is if this is shut down, we can go out over whatever neighboring country there is.
Okay, and what about routing protocol inside your network? Like get bigger and bigger, do you solve security issues somehow, or like or things like that?
There are certain attempts to solve security issues there. Unfortunately, it's not a very secure protocol because you can simply grab an IP and announce it in the network, and this will disturb the network, but you will be pretty soon ignored by the neighboring nodes because people find out, hey, there's something weird going on. Especially in the moment when they realize that their network connection isn't working anymore. So these issues are actually, we had them in the past, and they're actually solved pretty quickly.
Okay. So with a standard IP over this
Yes, and we have this dynamic routing protocol where basically it works that each.
okay.
I think the time is not long, but it basically works the way I announce what IP I have and whoever I see, and everyone does the same thing, and then I know who is there and how to get to them.
Okay, so that was thank you a lot, Mini, for a very interesting presentation. Now we have another 10 minutes, coffee break and tele break, and we start at 5 p.m.